Hello students, this is Dr. Henry and I'm your instructor for the US 215 Business Communication. In this particular video, we're going to discuss chapters 9 and 11. Chapter 9 talks about routine business messages and chapter 11 talks about bad news messages. Alright, so let's begin with routine messages. Alright, so routine messages may be those that you frequently have to do throughout your work day or work week. We'll look at some examples of routine messages in a second, but how you approach these routine messages is going to determine whether others view you positively or negatively. They're going to be rating, how responsive you are. I have been a student. I know many of you are students now, and it is sometimes frustrating if you send an email to an instructor and it takes them a long time to respond. Well, that same thing translates into the business world. So if you're on a team and you take too long to respond to emails or, even voicemail messages, the people are going to view you negatively. They're going to also be rating your reliability. How reliable are you? Can they depend on you when it's time to do projects? Other things in routine messages, it talks about your attention to detail. So if you send out routine messages and they frequently leave off the time or the date or the place or some critical key information, it's going to impact your credibility. Also, commitment, how committed you are to the job, how committed you are to the team, and whether you are professional. So the way you craft your routine messages speaks to your workplace identity and how others view you at work. Alright, so when you're developing your routine messages, normally they should take less time because, if you have a weekly meeting and you have to send out a reminder every week, it's pretty much going to be standard. It's routine, something you do quite regularly. But according to our book, you still need to go through the writing process where you plan, draft, and review. Alright, so here are the components of the average routine message, and there again in just a second we're going to look at some more specific examples. But for a routine message, you want to always state the primary message, like what is it you're really trying to say to the person, and it doesn't need to take a whole lot of words for you to do that. It talks about organizing your message into paragraphs with 80 words or less, and then also towards the end, you want to restate what it is you're saying, especially if you want them to do something. You may want to restate it at the end, and then the overall tone of the message needs to have a view to goodwill, and goodwill speaks of your motives. So if you're saying, hey, I'm a worker just like you, and we're a team, and we need to get this done, I'm willing to do my part, I need you to do your part, that is what goodwill talks about. Alright, so you know the planning or writing process from earlier chapters, so I'm going to skip by this. Alright, so now we're going to get into different types of routine messages. So one type of routine message would be where you are making a request. So you're asking somebody to do something. It could be a whole lot of different things that you could be asking them to do. But what you want to have in your request, you want to make the request so they know what you want. You want to provide the reason or rationale for the request. What is it you actually want them to do? Because you may only want them to do a part of it. That's what the call to action is. If you only need them to do one piece of it, then you want to let them know that, and always state goodwill or write it or say it in a manner that presents goodwill, which we talked about. Your book has examples, so you can read through the less effective and more effective examples. Another routine message is setting expectations. Here's where you're going to tell the person what is it you want, or what is it they are responsible for doing. Not necessarily what you want them to do, but according to their job description, according to their role on the team, what is it you want them to do, because they do need to know that very clearly and definitively. Providing directions. Sometimes you have to offer people step by step how to do something, and it could be doing something in a computer database. It could be finding a meeting location. What you want to do is make sure that you proofread it yourself and use numbers. You know, if one step is more important, or let me say this, if step one has to be done first, you want to use numbers. You can use bullets, but you often want to give it step by step in the order that they need to do them to get to the place where you want them to be. Okay, we talked about that. Okay, other kinds of routine messages. It could be you responding to an inquiry, so somebody asking you something. You want to make sure that you clearly read what is it they're asking. Also, you may want to do your responses using a numbered list, or some kind of special formatting like a bulleted list, so that you answer each part of their question. I can't tell you how many times I've sent an email and I'll have like 3 different questions and the person will reply back only answering one. That's very frustrating. So you want to clearly read the inquiry that you receive and make sure you answer each part of it. Alright, sometimes you may, as a routine message, have to create an announcement, and so you could be possibly updating a policy or notifying staff about an event that's coming up. What you want to do is grab their attention, give the announcement, provide the details, the who, what, when, where, why, how, and when. And what you want them to do, if you want them to go to a website and schedule it or sign up, let them know that in your message. Sometimes you may want to make a claim on something, a request from another company to refund you or to correct something, to claim something that they promised maybe. These would be examples of making a claim. And so you always want to give the reasons or the foundation for your claim that you're making. Say, hey, in accordance to your email, in accordance to your earlier report, we qualify for whatever it is, for example. So you want to make sure all those things are represented in your message if you're making a claim. You want to show appreciation anytime a team member does well, or if a team or department helps your team or department. You always want to appreciate them and show thanks, and it can be formal or informal. It could be, you walking by their office and saying, hey, thanks. It could be through an email or letter. It could be at a meeting or function that you all have where others can see, but you definitely need to thank people who help you and your department to succeed. Sometimes congratulations are in order if one of your team members is recognized for going above and beyond, if they're the team member of the week or the month. You want to definitely express that. That is a type of routine message as well. You want to encourage people when they do well, because it, as a professional or a colleague, you're acknowledging their good work. The last thing you might have to do is a routine message, and that is make an apology. There could be many different reasons why an apology is needed. Maybe there was a mistake, something was confused. Either way, you need to accept responsibility and make a commitment to hopefully not repeat that action, if you will. But if it occurs, you definitely need to apologize, and it may need to be verbal in front of others, if other people were involved or know about it. You want to be honest and clear and open, and do whatever remedies you can to resolve the problem, and let the person know that you are sorry and you're going to incorporate things that will prevent it from happening again. Alright, so those are examples of routine messages from chapter 9. We're going to move on to chapter 11. Alright, so chapter 11 talks about bad news messages, and so from time to time we all may have to give or receive news that we may not want to hear but need to hear, and it may not be pleasant all the time. So here are some things to think about as it relates to your credibility when you have to deliver bad news. You always want to be honest and open, tell people the truth. they may not like what you're saying, but they need the truth. You want to research shows that honesty, leads to more trust in the person who's giving the bad news. So part of credibility is doing the right thing, and if you have to deliver bad news, do so truthfully, honestly, and in a timely manner. And this will strengthen relationships between you and customers, between you and your co-workers and employees and employer. All right, some guidelines. I talked about doing so in a timely manner. If you give bad news way after the incident has occurred or the situation, people are often disconnected, and they'll be wondering, why you waited so late or why you didn't give them enough notice so that they could possibly correct the situation. So you want to think about that. You want to choose the right channel. Do you want to do a written or verbal display of the bad news? Depending on how severe, and later in this chapter it talks about, if it's really, really bad or the severity is bad, then you want to do that in a person-to-person format, verbally, versus, emailing somebody. If it's really bad, you do want to have that personal contact with them so they can see your facial expressions or your body posture and position, because all that plays a part in communication. You want to sympathize with the people who are receiving the bad news. You want to provide a simple, clear rationale or reason, for the situation as it occurs, depending on what it is. You want to explain the impact, so how it impacts them, how it impacts the team or the company. Did it cause the company to lose money or something like that? You always want to let people know that part of it as well, because that'll help them to understand why they're receiving the bad news or why it's impacting them. And then you definitely want to focus on solutions. How we're going to fix this? What measures are we going to put in place to avoid this from occurring again? And that shows goodwill when you do those things. Okay, we talked about identifying with the audience. Later in the book, it does give you examples of the advantages and disadvantages of the different formats, so verbal versus written. I'm going to allow you to take time to go through those. There's also a chart in here. When I talked about how severe the news is, will determine the channel. There's a chart in here for that. You want to look at that as well. I'm trying to be mindful of my time while I'm covering both of these chapters, but other things you want to keep in mind when you are conveying bad news, you want to make sure you have the facts. If you're holding someone responsible, for example, you want to make sure that they alone bear the responsibility, or if it was a team involved, then you need to inform the team versus just that one person, if that's the case. So you want to do your homework before relaying the bad news. And steer clear from negative emotions. You want to make sure that you're calm and rational when you're speaking to people or writing to people as well, because people can often interpret your mood in your writing. Ways to develop your bad news message. There's an indirect way and a direct way. So you'll see here in just a second, I'll look at the direct way. But first, the indirect way to deliver bad news, you're going to start with a buffer, and all of them start with a buffer. I kind of call this the positive, negative, positive sandwich. So you start with something positive, in the middle you have the negative news, and then at the end you end with something positive. So it's positive, negative, positive sandwich is how you want to look at it. And so depending on the route you choose, indirect or direct, is just going to determine when you deliver the bad news. So in the indirect way, you would start with your buffer, and then you provide a rationale. So all the reasons and whys, the research, the data that led up to it, and then you deliver the bad news. Explain the impact, focus on what we're going to do in the future to stop it, and that's the indirect method. But in the direct method, you're going to always, again, start with the buffer, but you're going to go immediately into telling them what is the bad news. Then you go to, well, what's the rationale, the facts, the data, the reasons, etc., the impacts, and how we're going to move forward from future. Okay, so those are those two things. And these are the highlights for both chapters 9 and 11. As always, if you have questions, concerns, or comments later, you can reach me via email at mshenry@lawsonstate.edu. Thanks for watching. Bye.